All right. Well, hey everyone. This is Happy Ponies, Healthy Bronies. I'm Max Ogier, the one and only panelist, and this is about 5 times the size of the audience I was expecting based on last year. So my record attendance was 18, and I've counted, I think, 49 people in here. So, yeah, that's my online fandom name thing if you want to like stalk me on the internet at any time. I do stuff. And, all right, so I did something similar to this last year, but it was the first time I'd ever done a panel, and I wasn't really sure how I wanted to go about it, so it was kind of a little more like haphazard with the way it was organized. But I decided to go a different direction this year, and I think in my opinion at least, I organized it in a better way. But we'll all see. So let's get this. All right. So the main advertising thing I used for this was the is the mouse showing up on there? No. Of course it isn't. Okay. Well, the main thing I stressed in the little summary was how much of an effect psychological or emotional health can actually have on your physical state of being, which I'll go into and the reasons for why. But there are the other main things that people usually talk about. Although emotional health and the importance of adequate sleep are things that are usually left in the dust when people talk about maintaining a good state of health. So the four primary things that you can break everything down into are your psychological or emotional health, your physical activity. I don't know if anyone remembers this. It's, you know, some of us like me are old and from the old days of like 3 years ago. 'Cause I'm about to turn 23, so I feel really ancient right now. And let's see, there's your nutritional intake and the importance of adequate sleep. So we're going to start off with psychological health here, with the general question of what's actually important about being sane. I have a place where you can go. It has padded walls and locked doors. So, apart from the obvious things, this right here is true and not true for some things, but for a lot of things it is. There's so much activity going on inside of you right now that you have no conscious control over, but it's consistently regulated with absolute precision by the 90% of your brain that you're never using, that myth comes from about how you're never really using most of your brain power. That's a misstated myth, just in case anyone believed that. If you used 11% of your brain power, you would not become superhuman. You would just be shutting down part of your digestive tract, most likely. So the things like your endocrine system, all of your glands that secrete various hormones, that's controlled by both the levels of hormone in your blood, and mainly the initial secretion is done by your nervous system, along with your entire digestive tract. Now, it influences things that it does not have an absolute control over. Like as much as they may seem disconnected, your brain actually does have a significant influence on how active your immune system is, mainly because it has several neural connections to your bone marrow and actually can send specific signals telling your bone marrow to switch over from producing a majority of red blood cells over to producing a majority of white blood cells. So there's these here just as quick examples. You can see the the connection going from your central nervous system into your adrenal gland. Your adrenal glands secrete a lot more than just adrenaline. They secrete all kinds of hormones that do all kinds of things, things that make it easier for your cells to absorb and use fats as a source of energy. Things that make your kidneys reabsorb more minerals instead of excreting them from the body. And these are influenced by signals from your brain. And if you're in an extremely stressed state, or if you're in an extremely depressed state, that can easily affect this, because in a depressed state, the amount of signals flowing out from your brain are going to be extremely lacking. So secretion of hormones that are necessary to help you utilize energy are going to significantly drop, and that leads to a lot of things like chronic fatigue and problems with weight loss, because you're not secreting the necessary amount of hormones that would actually allow for that. And it gets you into a state where you can easily become tired much easier than you normally would. Now, and yeah, okay, I forgot the mouse wasn't there. So there are nerves all along your digestive tract. Your digestive tract can operate itself. It has a rhythm set up in its own like pacemaker cells, similar to what your heart has. However, if it has no input from your brain, it will simply repeat that rhythm over and over like a conveyor belt, and that will not end well if you don't have external controls, because it will simply try to push everything through at the same rate, secrete the same amount of acid and enzymes for anything you eat. The signals it gets based on what you're tasting, most of which is based on whether there's proteins in the food that are hitting your taste buds or whether the food's acidic. Send signals to your brain telling it to tell your digestive tract that it needs to secrete more acid or less acid and more enzymes in its place. So if you're any kind of altered mental states, be it anything from psychosis to depression or just high levels of stress, your digestive tract is usually the first thing that your brain will actually stop trying to regulate actively, because it knows it can operate itself, and your brain's gonna save the best things. It will abandon the best things last of all. It will save its control over your hormone secreting glands until the absolute last second. But first, it will abandon your digestive tract, and then it will abandon your immune system, and then it will abandon everything else if you're that stressed or if you're that depressed. At that point, if you were in that much stress, that would mean you're in some kind of situation that is already likely going to result in death anyways. So Book Horse here is looking at a nice chart that I just threw in because it shows connections to the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys, connections to the digestive system, and at the bottom there you can see the connections to your bone marrow, where normally your bone marrow produces about 95 to 99% red blood cells, and the last little bit is white blood cells, because the red blood cells are what absorb and carry oxygen in the lungs and then carry that oxygen to every other cell in the body which needs it, or else in that case that would result in death. However, your brain can alter the bone marrow state and raise the production of white blood cells by a few percent, which is effectively double or triple for the white blood cell count, but is not significant enough to lead to any kind of deoxygenation of your blood. And so then you come into physical activity, and I'm a molecular biology major, so I tend to focus more on molecular stuff. I'm not going to make the mistake I did last year. I'm not actually going to go that deep into it. I'm going to show you a bunch of some pictures of some stuff just because I like scaring you. But all right, so first off, I'm actually going to show you how muscles work, because I find no one ever actually really gets taught that truly. So This is a more cartoony version of a muscle, and is not actually like to scale. It's mainly just to show you the organization. So you have the muscle, it's a muscle itself, and inside it you'll have these big bundles called fascicles, and inside of those you'll have these long strings called myofibrils, and inside of those you'll have your actual muscle cells, which are full of fibers that wrap around each other. And this is a semi-more realistic version in terms of size. So when you look down at the molecular level, there's these little hammer-looking things that are attached to the main fiber, and there's these twindly red fibers there. That these hammers, if you get an action signal from your nerves to activate a muscle, it releases a bunch of ATP. If anyone remembers that from high school biology, maybe. Yes, I see you, person back there. So ATP will trigger a reaction with these little hammer things, and they'll reach up and grab that and pull that red cord along. And all in all, you get a total of this that I can't really see well from this angle, but you can see the top compared to the bottom. It pulls the red cords in tighter, which ends up leading to the actual contraction of the muscle itself. And this here, the thing on the bottom is, that's not really that scary of stuff, but I threw that in there anyways because that shows the kind of inner workings. Now, there's these things called myokines that are actually relatively new in terms of us actually knowing that they exist. We've only really been studying these things for the past 10 years because we've only really had the technology to like see stuff like this at the molecular level for the past like 20 years or so. So as you contract a muscle, it will release a tiny amount of things called myokines. They're all just sitting along the cell wall waiting for the slightest bit of friction to send them out into the blood. And they all trigger various things. They can bind chemically to receptors on fat cells and trigger the fat cells to just start dumping everything they have into the bloodstream. They can trigger your liver to start releasing special proteins that will return to that very muscle. If you've been working out a lot and the fibers have torn, it sends a feedback loop. It goes to the liver, releases things that come back to the muscle that tell that particular set of muscle fibers not to turn on if the brain tells that muscle to contract. So the fibers around it will still activate, but that one will stay shut off so that it can regenerate itself. And so they also do something very specific to differentiate between the different types of energy. They will bind to most of the other cells in your body in a way that will tell those cells to only use glucose or any other type of sugar that's circulating around, so that your muscles can have direct access to all of the fat that's being released. And this is going to start going into the benefits of exercise, and this one in particular is weight maintenance. Because when I was thinking about stuff for this, I asked some people, and one of the things that was brought up in particular was blood pressure, and why being overweight gives you high blood pressure, and why high blood pressure is actually a bad thing. So I got this here. One of them's an actual electron scanning image, and the other one's just a slide from a microscope. The two are comparisons of a regular person versus an obese person. All those green lines in the top picture, that's blood that's had iodine poured into it so that it will light up when they scan it. And you can see the clear difference on the right. The obese person has extremely restricted blood flow, which leads to a lack of oxygen being delivered to body tissues, which can lead to them it leads to body tissues going into chemical reactions that they really shouldn't when they get desperate to survive, which can cause things to happen to your DNA that can result in cancer. Now on the bottom one shows an actual photograph taken down the lens of a microscope at a slide. The big white blank spaces are actually fat cells, and you can compare the one on the left of a regular then to the one on the right of an obese person. The pink stuff, and on the right, in case of the right, the brown stuff, that's regular connective tissue that normally holds all the fat cells together and ties them to the skin and everything. And the reason for the color differentiation here is because there's all the connective tissue in the picture on the left in the normal person is oxygenated and alive, and pretty much all the connective tissue in between the fat cells in picture B is dead. So having your blood vessels constricted it sends feedback signals to your heart, and your heart will apply more force when it pumps with each beat, and that causes the pressure your blood's exerting on the inside of the walls of your blood vessels to increase. And it can get high enough to points where in the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries, that are actually the ones where the oxygen freely leaks out into the tissue, it can get high enough to a point where it will start bursting those open. And that can lead to a lot of things. It can cause some forms of arthritis. It can lead to hematomas, which are they're the kind of like bruises that don't heal and just consistently swell and get bigger, and can also lead to that entire capillary bed will just die and seal itself up to prevent any more blood leaking out of the system, and all the tissue in that area will just lose its access to oxygen permanently because the capillary bed's not going to reestablish itself. Now, something that's never really taught to that many people is your heart's not entirely responsible for your blood flow. The force your heart contracts with is a lot. However, particularly once you get down to say the feet, it's not enough on its own to shove the blood all the way back up against the force of gravity. So a lot of your circulation in your extremities actually relies on muscle contraction to sort of act as a squeezing pump action to help the blood along. It will still be moving gradually with the beats of your heart, but it needs active muscle activity to maintain a decent circulation. So this one people tend to have the most problem with. Something I'm not actually exempt from. I was going to do a prop. I ate all the German chocolate before we actually got to today, so I was going to have a bar of it and a glass of milk. And I was going to say something like, if any of my Patreon supporters are in here, this is where your money goes, and I was going to eat it. But I ate all of it before we even got to yesterday. So this is something that a lot of people get misled on, although what I'm saying you might take the wrong way too, because people will tend to interpret things how they want to for their own benefit. This is to scare you again. I personally love it, but Course definitely loves it. You can see just at the top, I just want to show sugar is not quote unquote just sugar. Sugar is actually a lot of different things. Anything that fits into this, they're all different forms of this same molecule, this carbon hexagon, except for fructose. Fructose is like an edgy, rebellious teenager that wants, because it's over there being a pentagon instead of a hexagon. And then both fats and the glucose all get turned into ATP eventually through various means. Most of your cells do rely on sugar primarily because sugar is faster, because it's already in a state that can be easily used. However, cells like muscle cells tend to prefer using fat because one string of fat there that's the size of 2 whole glucose molecules has enough energy density in it to provide about 40 times as much ATP when it's broken down. However, that's a more intense chemical process to do that. But since your muscle cells demand so much energy based on what they're actually doing, they end up preferring fats as their source of energy income. Now, this is something that's almost never, ever talked about. Your meal timing actually is really, really important. I'm not talking about eating breakfast at 6 a.m. and then eating lunch at noon. This is particularly if you're trying to make sure you're not like putting on weight. You need to pay close attention to this here, because this will vary with how much you eat, but generally for a full-sized meal, not talking a snack, but for a full-sized meal, about 4 hours, maybe 5, is how long it will actually take it to go through the first pass, which is just the stomach and the first part of the small intestine. And after it gets through there, after the absorption process is done, your insulin levels will start falling, which spike whenever you eat anything, not just sugar. Insulin tells the cells in your body to start absorbing things, packing fat in, and to not use what's coming out of the digestive tract. However, once you pass that mark, the 4 or 5 hour mark, in a span of maybe 2 to 3 minutes from when you actually hit it, you will instantly basically stop secreting insulin, and you'll start dumping another hormone that no one ever hears about called glucagon into your blood, which is literally the exact opposite. It will go to your cells that are storing sugar, tell them to dump it into the bloodstream, go to your fat cells, tell them to dump fat into your bloodstream, and pretty much everything along those lines. But the important thing here is the very bottom bullet I put is if you're a snacking kind of person, that will really hamper any like weight management you try to do, because any amount of food going into your system will immediately reset the current and will flood your blood with insulin again. And insulin, if it's present, will always override any signals coming from glucagon. So you need to actually actively wait several hours between each meal, or else your body is going to consistently remain in a storage mode. Now, vitamins, yada yada, something that's overhyped or underhyped, depending on who you speak to. And there's a gap between vitamin E and vitamin K that I don't even actually know the source of, because I'm not even sure when we decided to like really do this system. We gave the vitamins letter designations based on what order they were discovered in. But then when we got to E, which is something actually called alpha tocopherol, we then decided to skip to K because of reasons that I don't understand. So these are necessary for a lot of things. Vitamin A, I tried to put these in order. Vitamin A actually is a necessary component to making the retinal pigments in your eyes that let you perceive colors. All the B vitamins, almost all of them in some way, are necessary for your energy use, the metabolic processes that go on inside of every cell. Particularly B6 and B12 are extremely necessary for DNA synthesis when your cells replicate themselves in a process where they're healing or anything. Vitamin C is extremely necessary for immune function. Your white blood cells that actually kill things, any type of phagocyte, is what they're called because of a process called phagocytosis, where they'll grab a virus or a bacteria and swallow it and then cover it in bleach. Because there's bleach inside your body, just so you know. There's about 2 to 4 milliliters of bleach inside you right now. And your body is actually the source of where we discovered bleach in the first place. However, that's an extremely tiny amount concentrated in your white blood cells, because that's actually what they use to kill things. Now, to actually grab a hold of anything, they need special molecules on the outside of their cytoplasm. And to make these, we found they actually need vitamin C to actually create these, because we put some in a petri dish and we gave them some vitamin C. We put some in a petri dish and gave them absolutely nothing. And the ones that were deprived of vitamin C 10,000 times over could not grab a hold of anything to save their lives. So vitamin C is necessary. You don't need to take a bottle of it and start chugging all the pills. All that's going to do is give you diarrhea, depending on how much you go for. Vitamin D is necessary for calcium absorption, and calcium is necessary for a lot more than people seem to think it is. Calcium is actually necessary for your nerves to send signals. It's necessary for your muscles to function. I was actually going to go into that, but I decided I'd save some time. Vitamin E is you could live without it, but you wouldn't make it to the Western life expectancy of 80. You'd probably live to maybe 50 or 60. But you do generally need it. That gets distributed to every cell, gets stuck in the cell wall, and helps protect it against oxidation, which is when radical oxygen molecules or oxygen-containing molecules that weren't able to be neutralized by something else get a hold of any molecule in your body, in any cell, and will basically interact with it in a very negative way that'll destroy it into some kind of irreversible product. And that obviously destroys the function that it was performing. That in particular is how alcohol causes liver cirrhosis, is because alcohol is, to an extent, depending on how the rate you drink it at, it will be neutralized in your liver. But if you pass a certain point, you will overwhelm the system, and then the particular enzyme molecule called glutathione is there just won't be enough numbers to counteract the alcohol molecules, so the alcohol molecules will just start interacting with anything they see. And your liver, unfortunately, when it starts losing cells, its scar tissue forming process is faster than its actual regeneration process. So in most cases, if the gap is big, if the number of cells killed is too large, it will just throw protein strands across the gap and just pull itself back together, as opposed to actually regenerating and healing the gap. Or if a gap is small, then it will be regenerated. That's actually true for most tissues, except the nervous system. The nervous system is aregenerative. Once you hit adult maturity, your nervous system loses its ability to regenerate, for reasons we're actually still not even positive of yet. K is important, but you can live without it as long as you don't have hemophilia. Basically, it's semi-necessary for the blood clotting elements that stop you from bleeding, but they can function without it, but they'll function a lot slower. So I really tried to get the video clip of the rock munching scene, but the software I used to get video footage crashed my editing software 3 times when I was trying to actually make the two work with each other. So I accepted the sign for what it was and just went with the picture. So these, you have the salts and minerals. Most of these you always see paired with chloride in some kind of salt form. So they mostly always just appear as like a whitish clear substance. But this is what they all actually look like in reality. Chloride's not really what you're going for. What you're going for is all of these, all of which in their natural form are metal and rocks. And they're necessary mostly for the nervous system to function. Because of Happy Book Horse here, I threw another thing in here again. The basic version is the way your nervous system works is when one nerve excites another, it trips a bunch of receptors that open these channels, and positively charged ions, sodium or potassium, will flood in, And as they flood in, like charges repel each other, so they will flow down the nerve. And as they pass by, all the other channels are tripped open by an increase in positive charge. So they'll trip more open as they go, which lets more in. And so it's a positive feedback system until the signal reaches the end and blasts out to the next nerve that's going to receive it. So sodium and potassium are the primary reason that your nervous system actually functions. And that will lead us back in to this point right here. The most overlooked thing in this entire topic. So sleep is legitimately necessary for a lot of reasons. The majority, and I don't mean like 90%, I mean about 60, 65%, the majority of immune activity will actually take place while you're asleep because of the number of things that are active in your body while you're awake take up so much of the energy that's available in your bloodstream. However, when you go to sleep, your digestive tract is shut down, your muscles are immobilized, so there's an excess of energy available in your bloodstream that your white blood cells can then make use of, and so they become much more active while you're actually asleep, which is the real reason why your doctor and then your parents, without knowing really why they're saying it, but just listening to your doctor, tell you to get lots of sleep when you're sick. Reorganizing and strengthening your neural synapses. This is what actually forms memory. As while you're awake, anything you do, anything you learn, anyone you speak to, signals are constantly being sent, and little memory markers will be put into the cell walls of neurons that are receiving constant signals throughout the day. And while you're asleep, things called glial cells, because your brain isn't made up of just neurons, these little tiny things called glial cells will come in, feel where there's a lot of memory markers, and will actually take apart some neurons and use pieces to reconstruct more connections between the ones that were most commonly used throughout the day, which is how memory is first built and slowly strengthened over time, and eventually how you can lose memory also, because if it comes down to it, they'll start taking apart things that they'll start taking apart connections that you haven't used in 10 years and use those to build new ones. But all the processes that go on in your brain generate nitrous oxide, which in high concentrations is really dangerous. So we found really recently that the actual feeling of tiredness that makes your eyes like start to fall closed on their own, that is actually entirely dependent on how much nitrous oxide has actually built up in your brain, because it will start tripping receptors that will tell the neurons in your sleep center to fire across everything else, which will make you tired, and is also comes into the reason why if you, like I did on the ride up here, if you fall asleep on the train for like 15 minutes, with your head hanging down and you didn't mean to, but then you snap back up, you suddenly won't be tired again for another 2 or 3 hours. The process of purging and neutralizing the nitrous oxide is incredibly fast. That does not actually take the 8 hours of sleep that you're told to get. The 8 hours is more for the benefit of your immune function and for regenerating damaged tissue and for reorganizing your memories. But it's the nitrous oxide buildup that actually causes signals of tiredness to be sent. Now, the nerves outside of your brain in the regular central nervous system do produce it as well. But outside of your brain, where there's where there's more room for things and not confined to the space inside your skull, the cerebral spinal fluid is a lot more densely packed with enzymes and proteins that can neutralize it actively, but your brain is very limited for space, so this can only be done while you're sleeping. And right here is the last bit of scary stuff I have. This shows why the calcium is necessary. At the very end, when the neuron's actually going to send a burst to the next one, only calcium, because calcium is much larger than sodium and potassium, only calcium is large enough and has enough charge to cluster this space and force these little spheres that contain the neurotransmitters to actually come out and go out to the next neuron in line. And so it goes down and they bind to those receptors there, and enzymes that patrol up and down the receptor area will read, they'll read and see that a receptor's been activated, and they'll grab random stuff from the cerebrospinal fluid and create a memory marker and stick it in there for the glial cells to find later. So that's the general conclusion of the actual presentation itself. Just in case, as much as I doubt there are, just in case there's anyone here that actually is of like high school or university age and might have been intending to go down the medical path in some direction, I'm not going to lie to you about what you're facing. Yeah, you're going to be making a lot of faces over the years, a lot of them before you even get there, because the face on the left, is for being asked really, 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 really stupid questions, and the face on the right is for being asked questions that you thought you would never be asked because you didn't think there were questions dumber than the ones that the pony on the left just got asked. And then I had one more, but I wasn't going to throw it in there. I had like extremely aggro horse Nurse Redheart for when you meet interesting people that I don't even have an actual job in the healthcare industry yet. I'm still going down the education path for it. I have a while before I'll actually have a medical license, because that process, if you're perfect, if you are a perfect student and a perfect, I take 25 college credits a semester, every semester, including the summer, and you have, you just have an endless source of money, then yes, you might be able to pull off the whole thing in 8 years, just like you might be able to pull off a regular bachelor's in 4 years. However, the actual national average is 5. Anyone who tells you otherwise is actually legitimately lying. The average amount of time spent to get a medical or pharmaceutical license is typically 12 or 13 years, of which I'm in my 5th year of that process. So I'm still a long ways off. You learn and are taught basically everything you're going to learn in the first half of it. The remaining half is a lot of clinical practice and you working under someone and being heavily supervised to make sure that you actually know what you're doing. And after having someone like staring at you and silently judging your every action for 4 years, are you actually allowed to do anything on your own? But I didn't include the aggro horse one because I didn't want to like have everything fade out just to make room for it. But that's for when you run in situations like I have, where you're assisting the clinic. I wasn't actually touching anything, but you're just assisting and carrying things around, and you have someone come in and accuse all of you of being part of the Illuminati and claiming that your vaccines are actually mind control chemicals. You're going to find that eventually. There's some interesting people out there. So I won't lie again about this. This is literally what's going to happen. It's not like a struggle through the educational process and then you get into your like dream world. This is literally what happens. You go from this right to this, basically. Because this any position in this field is exceptionally demanding. You are not going to feel appreciated. You actually, most of the time, you're probably going to feel hated a lot of the time, because unless you're the actual doctor, then you're usually going to be the one receiving negativity from people because they want to vent it somewhere and they're afraid of venting it to the doctor himself. So in my case of potentially becoming a pharmacist, we're one of the most one of the heaviest recipients of people's anger, as you know, not truly directed at us as it is. We're just one of the sources they tend to vent at. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. But somehow, for some reason, a lot of us still choose to go down here because we just ever so slightly care more about other people than we do ourselves, as much as it can feel like you're walking on a fringe line. But if anyone intends to actually go down any medical path, just be prepared for what's coming. Nursing, the educational path forward is pretty easy. Depending on what level you want to go for, it can be 2 to 4 years. For becoming a medical assistant or a physician's assistant, that you can do in something like 6. But becoming an actual doctor or an actual pharmacist, that's usually more than a decade's worth of study and work. And if you want to become some kind of specialist, or if you want to become a surgeon, you're not actually going to be allowed to operate on your own and have your actual surgical license until you're 40. So, really, the next time you go to any kind of specialist or go see a surgeon, take a good look at them, check their driver's license. I dare you to tell me that they were younger than 35. So that is the actual conclusion of everything I have to say myself. So, by all means, please make me feel like I exist for a reason. Did they? Oh, okay. I don't know, deep. I mean, I don't really hear a lot of people talking or making noise. I'm pretty sure I could probably hear everybody. All right, one person?
I think they messed up the word, but celluloplasm, is that right?
Cytoplasm.
No.
What?
It's part of the cell. Am I on? Yeah. So I think it's celluloplasm, part of the cell. I have some health issues, and there's a significant push to increase this because it helps with the liver and it helps with talking about intercellular. And I'm just wondering, in your education and in your experience, have you come across it? But I always botch how to pronounce it, but it's not cytoplasm. But it doesn't sound like you're familiar with it.
As of the moment, cytoplasm is the only plasm that I'm used to using. I haven't taken the course specifically on the liver yet. I've done the full scale 2-year in-depth course on anatomy and physiology in general. I'm just getting into specific organs now.
I think it's awesome that you're doing this. What is it, panel, I guess? Really good information, so thank you.
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the nitrous oxide and feeling tired, but I find that I can sleep all day, every day, and sometimes I'll take a 15-minute nap and go right back to sleep, and it doesn't really seem to matter how much sleep I get or don't get or for how long, and I was wondering if that could be related to my nitrous oxide.
No, that sounds like you're talking about some kind of chronic fatigue. That's something that I also suffer from as well. That's completely different. Nitrous oxide is the normal regulatory system. You can be made to feel tired by other things if your brain decides that it wants you to be tired for whatever reason. It can initiate the signals on its own. However, nitrous oxide is is like the absolute mechanical like guarantee that if it's there, you will feel tired. However, it's not the only thing that can cause it. With situations with chronic fatigue can come from a lot of different things. In a lot of cases, really long-term infections like Epstein-Barr virus or tuberculosis tend to cause a lot of chronic fatigue because the brain knows that the immune system functions better when you're asleep, so it will try to force you to sleep as much as it can. In other cases, if you're really depressed or really stressed out a lot, it can try to make you sleep as well, because it's trying to rearrange its connections a lot more thoroughly, and sometimes also we run into a really bad situation that we don't like, called idiopathy, which means something's going on and we actually don't really have any conceivable idea of what's causing it. Things that are idiopathic are really becoming extremely rare nowadays, but there are still things that we don't understand. But the most likely causes of chronic fatigue are usually really long-term infections, or stress, depression, anxiety. Particularly, I'm not like trying to say you might have tuberculosis or something, but particularly with tuberculosis, people know it primarily as a horrible lung infection that kills like children in Africa. However, in the rest of the world, it takes on another form that's systemic, where it's mutated its genome a little bit to actually infect every other cell, and all it will do is just hide inside every cell and eat up any glucose or any fat that cell takes in to use to replicate itself, and slowly fill up that cell, burst that cell. Actually ends up kind of functioning like a virus, except not through the same mechanism, because viruses usually make you sick by exploding your cells. But it will work really, the systemic version of tuberculosis works really slowly over the course of 5 to 10 years. And the primary signal of it building up is chronic fatigue. And that's something you can easily have tested, where they stick little microscopic pieces of the outside of a tuberculosis cell right under your skin. And so if you have the infection, then and we can do this for a lot of other infections as well. If you have the infection already, that means that there'll be antibodies in your blood for it. So we can stick a little thing under your skin, and we wait a little bit. And if the area where we stuck that little bit under your skin swells up any bit or turns purple or red, then that's a sign that you actually have the infection. You most likely don't unless you've been to Africa or interact frequently with someone who frequently goes to Africa. Okay, 10 minutes. So, was there anything else, or?
So I know at conventions and as a resident or an intern, people rely heavily on caffeine to avoid sleeping so that they can stay awake and function. And I was wondering how that affects metabolic processes.
That depends on the type of cell and tissue you're looking at. Caffeine has a similar effect to glucagon, but only on certain receptors that glucagon would normally bind to. In the case of caffeine, a lot of what it does is it binds to places in your body, like the liver, for instance, where a lot of sugar is stored in a big, like, just spirally sugar snake molecule called glycogen. It'll bind to places where it's stored. Yeah, I got it. It'll bind to places where it's stored and cause it to start dumping out. And will also have the effect of telling your other body cells to stop using sugar so that your brain can get all of it. However, it doesn't have the effect of telling your fat cells to release fat so that your other body cells can then rely on that fat in the place of the sugar that they're being told not to use. So it's a temporary solution to an energy problem, and it'll keep you awake for a little bit, but you're going to start realizing that you feel more tired in like the rest of your body, and you're only going to be kept awake as long as your sugar stores in your body are there to empty out for. Yeah. Plus, if the nitrous oxide levels in your brain get too high, then caffeine's not even going to matter.
Yeah, hi. Paramedic firefighter. I got my schooling done in 3 years. Any question? Hormones in the beef. Keep talking about that. Are there hormones in the beef meat, or is it just in the bloodstream?
Can you say that without the microphone? The microphone kind of like distorted it. You might be eating some of them. It all depends. And they primarily started giving them to all kinds of livestock a few decades ago for the simple reason of shortening the time it takes them to reach their full size in half, because they're corporations. They want money. So the faster they can make more beef for you, the more money they're going to get. And it's not they're cattle hormones, so they're not actually going to bind any of your receptors. All they're going to do is get dissolved by the acid in your stomach. And there are, by all means, there are things in some foods we have that you really should not be eating. But growth hormones used on animals are not actually one of the things you should primarily be concerned with. What a lot of the problems really might come from are the water that they might be drinking, or the food that they might be eating based on the water that food might have absorbed as it was growing. Because we've had this, we have EPA laws now that are pretty stringent, but for the past 60, 70 years since things really kicked off in the 50s, we've had this habit of just dumping toxic materials into the nearest river to the factory. And so we have no idea after that like how far that might spread and seep into watersheds in the ground that the crops we eat then will absorb that water up from. So the actual concern really comes from stuff that no one's raising flags about because no one actually knows it's there. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like any food grown near where particularly a paper mill is at extreme risk for just absorbing bleach itself that has been leaked into the water as the paper mill plant dumps out its waste. Now, bleach, as long as it's in your white blood cells where it's supposed to be, is perfectly fine. Bleach anywhere else will start destroying anything it touches, which is what it's supposed to do. So that's a particular problem in one case where my parents live, because there's a local farmers market thing that a lot of people like to go to because they like to support the local farming families and stuff. However, a lot of people started getting sick off of it because the food is grown 2 miles away from a paper mill. And so when a lot of people started getting really sick, they tested their blood and they found really dangerous levels of bleach, because the factory was still basically just dumping their wastewater into the front lawn. I think we have 2.
Reaching back to when you were talking about vitamins, I was curious about whether, from what you've gathered so far, I know in general the stance is your best way to get vitamins is from the foods that you eat, from natural sources. But as far as over-the-counter vitamins and supplements, what have you gathered from your experience and what you've seen, the value of them compared to getting them from the foods directly, and whether they actually have the kind of value and significance that they would have otherwise?
This is no. Probably left the one thing that I actually wanted in the hotel room. Let me see if I have it. Nope. Oh well. Well, in any case, if you buy something, one of the first things you want to do is there's going to be this little symbol down here at the bottom, a little seal that says USP approved, which stands for United States Pharmacopoeia, which is it's an organization that does not legally that companies are not legally required to send their products to for testing and approval. So it actually is a much better guarantee of a legitimate product than FDA testing is, because submitting to the USP is completely voluntary on the company's part. They can choose to do it or choose not to do it to save themselves a few bucks. So anything that has a USP stamp on it has been tested and confirmed that there is actual vitamin C in that vitamin C pill. After that, what you can typically do is just make sure if you see a brand like in this case Nature Made, if you see a brand that has a lot of their things labeled as USP approved, then you can typically trust them, because the actual approval process requires 5 to 10 years of consistently testing the product. So if one of their things doesn't have a stamp yet, that's just because it hasn't completed its trial time. But in terms of like whether or not you should take vitamins, that depends on your diet. Particularly if you don't eat a lot of vegetables, then you really probably should, because vegetables have out of all the food groups, vegetables have the highest concentration out of any. Particularly with the exception of lettuce, because lettuce is basically just water wrapped in a thin leaf. Green things like peppers and spinach typically have the highest concentrations of every single kind of vitamin in them. If you don't eat a lot of vegetables, then you probably should. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, then you also actually should, because some specifically like vitamin B6 and B12, the ones that are necessary for DNA synthesis, those are actually only synthesized in animal cells, and you can only get them from eating meat products. So if you don't consume meat, then you need to be taking B complex supplements. And if anyone else has a last question, that's going to take less than 30 seconds.
How does sleep break down versus immune time, cellular repair, memory consolidation, like by hours, I guess?
Hold on. Can I go ahead and rip these things out? Okay. Your sleep breaks down into, if you actually stay asleep, it'll break down into hour-and-a-half segments called the REM cycles, because you'll go through them one by one, where you start off dropping straight into REM sleep for about 1 or 2 minutes, because your body wants to go ahead and take care of the nitrous oxide really quick, or as much of it as it can. But then after that, you're going to fall into light sleep, which is it's basically an old you know, from the days we were cavemen defense mechanism, basically where you'll be asleep very lightly and very easily to be woken by any sound or disturbance, so that you can stay in light sleep long enough until your brain decides it's probably safe and you're probably not in any danger, and then it'll throw you into deep sleep again, and that'll typically only last like 10 to 20 minutes a time, and after a session of it, it brings you back out into light sleep again, basically just a